thank you for joining this session. And in the coming 45 minutes, I would like to build a Spring Boot application with you guys. And I would love to show you how easy it is and how quickly you can get started. So it won't be just another live demo, because I really want to involve you guys by asking you what we should build actually, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter with Spring Boot. You can just plug in anything and it will work. Well, almost everything will work. And I hope you guys can see that also today at the end of this talk, that you have seen that it doesn't really matter what you try to connect to Spring Boot. It will just work. Fingers crossed, right? So a little bit about myself. Wow, that's the biggest picture I've ever seen of myself. Well, it's not. I'm sorry, guys, if this is causing some physical pain. It's yeah. I'll keep it short, so that the next slide will appear very fast. So my name is Hanno. I'm from the Netherlands. I work at a company called Info Support. We do lots of great projects. If you're ever in the Netherlands or thinking about moving there, please come join us and work there, because it's a great place to work. I've been a Java software developer for over 9 years now, and have done quite a lot of projects with the classic Spring framework, so some Spring experience there. And when I came across Spring Boot, I really liked it, and I really wanted to do a talk about it. Also, I'm from the Netherlands, and in the Netherlands they make the greatest cookie in the world called stroopwafels. Who has eaten a stroopwafel? A few Dutchies there. That's cheating. A few other people. I've brought a few packs. I'm afraid it's not enough for everyone. I didn't expect this crowd, you know. But if you like to talk afterwards, please come down afterwards and grab a bite. And they are best if you leave them on a coffee cup for a few minutes with coffee in it. You know, first pour the coffee in and put it on a coffee cup. Wait a few minutes, then they get more soft and they're great. Yeah. Okay. So that's a little treat at the end. And even if you hate this talk, you still have something to look forward to, right? So that's great. So introducing Spring Boot. What's actually the purpose of Spring Boot? Why does it even exist? Well, the people at the Spring team thought that they really needed a framework that takes an opinionated view of building production-ready Spring applications. So it favors convention over configuration, and it's designed to get you up and running as quickly as possible. Now, how many of you have used the classic Spring framework? Yeah, thank you guys. That's like half of you. Well, most of you then will know that to make it work, well, in the classic sense, you need to provide a lot of XML files to be able to configure it. Well, more recent version of the Spring framework allow you to do lots of the configurations with annotations. But the configuration in the classic way, like 8 years ago, it wasn't really nice. It was kind of a pain in the ass. So Spring Boot tries to take this all away by assuming defaults that are, suitable for almost anyone. And of course, defaults can also be overridden. Rules are there to be broken, right? So that's also possible. So what are the key features of Spring Boot? Well, it creates standalone Spring applications. So that means just a single jar will be the final result, which means if you are building a web application, it can have a web server embedded in the jar file. What I said, so you don't need a WAR file anymore and feed it to an application server. You can just create your standalone jar, which is kind of handy when you want to publish it to a lot of test servers. You can just copy the jar and you're done. So that's great. And it uses automatic Spring configuration wherever possible. So it really tries to make sure that you write the tiniest bit of code to make it work. So this means no code generation. Another project from the Spring team that you might know of, have heard of, is a Spring Roo, which focuses on generating most of your project. This is not code generation, it just assumes lots of defaults. And so by doing that, you can make use of quite a bit of the framework without writing any code. And also no XML configuration, so the configuration that you need to do can all be done in Java and with annotations. But it still wants to offer all Spring features. Now, I haven't really tried porting a legacy Spring project to Spring Boot, and I don't think you should do it at all. But if you're starting a new project, it's a great choice. So some pros and cons. So you don't need a separate web server. Some debugging scenarios are a lot easier in IDEs because you're just debugging some functionality in a jar, so you can just attach your debug session, and you don't need application servers with debugging ports, which also works, of course, but this is a bit easier. And because it's just this jar file, you tend to get some faster deployments. Of course, this number will vary according to your project, but I've seen improvements of about 50% deployment time. So no XML classes at all, no web XML, no configuration needed. In fact, you can be up and running with just one Java file and one build script. Well, of course, it wouldn't contain many functions, but you would be up and running. Of course, there are some cons. You know, this is not the solution to every problem in the world, of course. So if you want to do some custom configuration, it will be a bit of a puzzle, but you need to override some defaults. It can be done, of course, and the documentation is full of these examples. So it's not really a big problem, but you know you need to look into that if you want to do some custom configuration. And of course, and I said it a few moments ago already, if you have a legacy Spring project, you wouldn't want to port this to Spring Boot because these defaults that are assumed, well, it will be a very coincidental if these defaults would be exactly the settings that you did use in your legacy Spring project. So you should import your legacy project would be my advice. And of course, the big con is that it uses Spring, so you're excluding roughly half of the Java community. Well, this number goes up and down, of course. So you need to be a Spring user. Well, if you want to start up your Java project, starting out, what do you need to do? Or in the words of the king of pop, do you want to be starting something? About what we claimed earlier, up and running with one Java file and a build script. Well, that wasn't really true, because you actually need 2 Java files. You know, a little lie here and there. I'll stop after this, I promise. Yeah. You need at least a controller to provide some functionality. So, for example, if you're building a REST application, you could build your REST controller like this, with a single method that tells you greetings from Spring Boot. And you need another Java class to make sure that this project can run and that the embedded web server will be spun up. So this is what you can achieve by using the Spring Boot application annotation on a class with a main method. Then you can use the run method of the class Spring application, and then your application will run. And you need a build script. For example, this one. It can be more complicated. It can also be a little less complicated. This is the build script that builds a web application, and you can tell by the dependencies on Spring Boot Starter Web. And also, there is a Gradle plugin or Spring Framework Boot, which you need to build the jar file with the embedded application server and directly run it. But with these 3 files, you can be up and running. But of course, all it can do is do some greetings. But well, in fact it's enough to start your project. Well, you already saw a Spring Starter dependency. There are lots of these starter dependencies, and they are just a set of convenient startup points to plug into your application, and then you can have some access to libraries that you want to use. And if you know them beforehand, then you can add them already. They all follow the same naming pattern, so for a few libraries you can actually guess the name of the dependency, but if you don't know it, they are listed in the Spring documentation also. These are a few that we're going to use today. So the Spring Boot Starter is the dependency that is included in every starter dependency. So for example, if you're going to test your project with which I assume you all are going to do, you need the Spring Boot Starter test dependency, and if you're building a web application, then you use the Spring Boot Starter Web. Spring Data with JPA, also possible, then you include that one. But there are a lot more starter images, and you can see them in the Spring Boot documentation. So, how do you start up your Spring project? Well, there's a great tool called the Spring Initializer, which lets you select all kinds of dependencies that you need. I can show you. So here it is. It's at start.spring.io, and you can just, well, select your requirements. You can tell what kind of project you want to generate, what language, what version of Spring Boot, and you can type all your dependencies here. Give your software a group ID and artifact ID, and then you can download a zip file, which is essentially the start of your project, and then you can extend it using your IDE. So we are going to use this in a few minutes, of course, and you can see how it works. Actually, we're starting that right now. Why not? So let's build an application, shall we? And before I can start building the application, I'm going to need your input. So I have prepared a voting session. It's on Kahoot. I'll start it up. And I really want to, let's see. It's starting right now. So if you want to participate in defining the requirements, you can get your device out and go to kahoot.it. And you'll get to a text field that asks you a game pin. If you enter the game pin above, you will enter our Kahoot, and you will be able to vote on the various options that I've thought of. Various choices that we can make regarding the functionality of our application. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Mark Zuckerberg. Yeah, great to have you on board. You know, it actually comes with quite a catchy song. I don't know if you've heard it. I won't be able to play it over the PA, but well, my laptop won't play it anyway. You know, you should try it out for yourself, build your own Kahoot, and then listen to the great music behind it. It's great. Although I can't prove it right now. Some SQL injection coming in. I like how creative people get when you do stuff like this. It's great, yeah. I actually enjoy this, you know? Yeah. So we've got 52 contestants right now. It's quite a lot. Great. Oh, one has left. What happened? What happened? Didn't I entertain you enough? What is this? Freaky. Stop leaving. I'm going to start now before everyone leaves, you know? So are you ready? We're going to ask you 2 questions. One is, what should be the purpose of our Spring Boot app? Because everything should have a purpose, right? So what should we build? Should we build a simple task planner? Click the triangle. Do you want a kitchen and cupboard tracker? What's in store? What's in stock? Click the diamond. Or do you want a craft beer catalog? Click the circle. The picture doesn't have anything to do with what we are doing here. Can you see it? I think I need to connect my screen again. 34 people want a craft beer catalog. You guys are beer junkies. Yeah, that's no problem. I need to connect my screen again. Let's move on before it leaves again. So we also, we're going to do some craft beers. What database should we use? Choose the triangle for relational. Choose the diamond for MongoDB, and choose the circle for Couchbase. Again, I'm not trying to influence any voting here, because this is just a randomly selected image. Choose whatever you think is the best choice, or what you want to see today. 52 answers, that's great. We are going to use MongoDB. That's great. Let's do that. thanks for taking part, everyone. At the second half, there will be another Kahoot to decide the rest of the requirements. But for now, we know enough to get started. We're going to create a craft bear catalog, and we're going to save all the bears in MongoDB. So let's go to Spring Initializer. I want to create a Gradle project with Java, the latest version of Spring Boot. Let's call our project JBCNConf'17 bears. Very original. And in order to make sure that we get all the MongoDB dependencies, we need the MongoDB dependency. I'm going to use an embedded MongoDB for testing, and I'm going to use the DevTools dependencies. This is for things like a hot deploy and all those things. And if you don't know the names of these dependencies, you can also switch to the full version of Spring Initializer, which generates a lot longer list, and then you can just browse all the available dependencies. But for now, I knew these by heart, so I just typed them in. Let's generate the projects. We could offer the zip file. Bears.zip, that's great. So let's open it up and extract it somewhere where I can find it. Preferably. And now let's try to import this project in IntelliJ. Sorry, this must be a bit small for you guys, but I'll try to make the code some bigger. Well, it's gonna auto-import our Gradle project right now, and it will try to get all the dependencies. Where it is, it downloaded all our dependencies. Maybe it's a good idea to look into the Gradle file. Is this readable for the guys in the back also? Does it need to be bigger? A bit bigger? I can make it a bit bigger, that's no problem. No. Yeah, there we go. Everything readable for everyone. So this is the Gradle file that was generated, and there was a MongoDB starter included from Spring Data, some DevTools, an embedded Mongo, and also the test dependencies. So now that we got everything we need, let's get started. Let's create a bear class, because ultimately we have to store some bears, right? And seeing as we are using MongoDB, let's create an ID field type string. And now what shall we store of the bears? Let's try to store a bear name. Let's try to store a bear style, because you could have Pilsner and the triple and the Belgian double and all those kinds of styles. So maybe you can tell me what the best styles in Spain are. I'm not really, I don't know actually, so maybe you can teach me something. And let's store the alcohol percentages, ABV, in a double. Well, we need some getters and setters for these fields, so let's generate them. Let's save our class. Also, this ID field needs to be tagged with ID from Spring Data. So there it is. In order to work with these bears, we need to create a repository to be able to read them from MongoDB. So let's create a bear repository. This is going to be an interface, and it extends the Mongo repository interface, which wants to know what type of entity are you storing. Well, we are storing bears, and it also wants to know what is the type of your ID, and I chose it to be string. Also, we need to tag this interface with the repository annotation. And the great thing is that by extending this Mongo repository, we get all kinds of operations that we don't need to implement ourselves. Spring Boot implements these methods runtime. So there are all kinds of standard methods that we can use right now, such as find all or save these basic operations are all available. Of course, you can define your own queries if you want, but I don't think we're going to need them for this session. So we have a beer class, and we have a beer repository. Now I've prepared a test class in another folder to make sure that this is functioning correctly. So let's copy that one and paste it in our project and see whether we did things the right way. You never know when you're doing a live demo, right? Yeah, could go wrong. So let's test it. I'm going to delete this test class because we don't need it anymore. I need to rename this one. There it is. So it's not really complicated, this class. I just annotated this with Spring Boot test, and it runs with a Spring Runner. I've injected our beer repository right here, and in the before annotation, the setup method, we save one beer, which happens to be my favorite at the moment. It's a Belgian quadruple. And in the test method, we're just going to test that there is a list of beers with size 1, because we saved one beer. I guess this should just work, you know, but famous last words, right? So let's run the beer test, and while we're waiting for the beer test to complete, let's do another round of Kahoot. So if you guys would be so willing to participate again, I would really appreciate it. This time the game pin will be a little bit different, but you can still reuse your username if you want. Because if this is working, the bit that we built right now, I need to know what kind of application we're going to build. Will be classic web application? Do you want some REST controllers? Do you want some fancy templating engine? I don't know. You guys can tell me. And I'm curious what we're going to build. Oh, I see. I joined myself. That's great. I hope I'm, satisfied with what Hanno is going to vote. I guess we had over 50 people, the other one, so let's wait until it is near 50. Jackie Chan. I like these creativity guys, that's great. Yep. 54, that seems like a fair number. Let's start. So the first question is about architecture. What architecture should our Spring Boot app implement? You can choose a single page application with REST controllers, AngularJS, or a Spring Web application with web controllers and a templating engine. If you choose the latter one, there's still a question about what templating engine. And with the first one, we already know it's AngularJS. Oh, this is a close one. But it seems like the single page application has won the vote. Woo! So that's the one that we're going to do. This means the next question is kind of obsolete because I don't need a templating framework, so I'm going to skip this one. The final question is still relevant because I want to know what web server we are running. The image doesn't tell you anything, right? Just choose your own preference. Yeah, I mean, while we're at it, just choose whatever you want. Time's up. We're going to use Tomcat. Well, thank you very much for your votes. We are going to build a single page application that stores our craft beers in a MongoDB database. Well, and our tests have run, and I can see that they succeeded. So that's great. It means the embedded Mongo was downloaded and executed. So that means we can store our beers in our database. That's great. That's great news. This means we can just continue building the application. So because we are doing a single page application, we need another dependency. We need the Spring Data REST implementation. So let's add this one. REST, which gets us all these nice annotations like REST controller. Speaking about REST controllers, we really need to create one if we want this application to do anything at all. So let's create one. Beer controller. It's going to have an annotation of REST controller. Yeah, and this was just downloaded by the added dependency, so that's great. Of course, we're going to need a beer repository. So there it is. We can auto-wire this, and Spring will just inject it. And I really want to start by creating an operation that will get a list of all the existing beers. So let's use the get mapping annotation and write a method that returns a list of beers. We'll call it list beers. Let's import that one. And this will return a call of beer repository.findAll. Actually, this is everything because that just returns a list of beers. So that's great. Now we also need some views, and I've prepared this before because otherwise we wouldn't be done at 5:30. And the views are not really the point in this presentation. You know, I will show you for a bit, but it's not a talk on how to create AngularJS views, and I guess you guys already know that actually, so that's no problem. Here we go. These are the views that we're going to need. So I'll just copy them. We're going to create a folder in the resources directory. And I call it static because it's the place where Spring Boot finds the AngularJS views. Let's paste this. And I guess this one should be in a JS subfolder, but I'm not sure anymore, so let's check it out. Yeah, it should be in a JS subfolder. So there we go. And also we need to make sure that we have an AngularJS dependency, so let's try to get that one here. We're in beers, resources, static. Oh. Where were we? Static. This is the place where we need the Angular dependency. Oh, I'm innocent. Yeah. Install, I forgot the install keyword. npm install Angular at 163. That's a very old version, I know, but we're talking about Spring Boot here, not about Angular. So the node modules folder has appeared, and there it is, AngularJS. So let's give it a spin and let's see if we are actually seeing something. You know, this is the fun part, right? You've done a few things and then you want to see if it runs correctly. So I'll just define a Gradle boot run task, which actually builds the project and then starts up the jar file, which also runs the embedded web server. If this fails, it's going to be really interesting. But it's not failing, so I'm happy. Let's see if we can see something on localhost. Not yet. No server chosen. So I did start Tomcat, right? The MongoDB driver says no server chosen. Not sure why. I've never seen this before. You know, live demos never prosper, right? Yeah, just don't do it. I know this problem. Yeah, I've seen this one before. So I'm going to use a little cheat, if you don't mind. Problem is, I don't have a production-ready MongoDB library on my machine right now, and it's because I really don't need it. I just want to show you an example. Well, I'm using an embedded MongoDB library right here, and because I have defined this with test compile, it's only available in the test scope. But right now, I'm just running the application, so this one won't be available. If I'm doing this, which is a little cheaty, I admit, but actually, then the in-memory MongoDB will start working, and we can try to run our application again. So sorry about forgetting that one. There's always one or two things that you're forgetting when you're doing a live demo, right? Yeah. While we're waiting for this one, I can show you a bit of the view that I've created here. It just asks us what beer is in stock, and it displays a list of beer in stock, and for every beer that it can find, it repeats some table rows. So it's a very sophisticated user interface that I've spent designing a few evenings of my spare time, and I hope you guys can appreciate that. Well, this is great, isn't it? Doesn't do anything. Well, maybe this is because I'm not really sure why this isn't working, so let's debug it, right? I mean, why not? Nothing is happening, is there? Just a moment. Could be that it doesn't find the index file. Static.js, main resources, static. Or it's in the wrong place. My get mapping? It has no path. I love you. No, I mean it. I mean it. You know, I did this talk on another conference, and I used the wrong ID annotation. I didn't use the Spring Data annotation, but the MongoDB, or I'm not sure which database we did at the time. And I also said I love you, and he didn't think it was weird at all. So I hope you also don't find it weird. You know, this is why I have you guys in the room, you know, like 150 people paying attention to see what I'm doing wrong. Yeah, I really appreciate it. So let's build this again. You know, if there's no get mapping, it won't do anything. Yeah, it's very logical. In the end, it's always very logical. Well, this is also not right, is it? Sorry? Yeah, I didn't. Well, this endpoint is not good at all. I see what I've. Yeah, I screwed up. Yeah. So you know what it is. If you're doing a REST controller, it's very important that you use a mapping URL, and well, you can choose any URL you want, of course. But it's quite handy to use something like this /rest/ well, the name of your service, in this case beer, and then if you just define a get mapping, it will if it does a get request on REST beer, it will enter this method, and we're going to use a delete mapping later on to delete the beer, so we don't need to edit the request mappings of the various methods, just of the class. Well, we don't need to edit it anyway, because we've defined it this once. Here we go. Yay, I'm quite relieved. Yeah, so there's no beer in stock, and this is because we're running an embedded MongoDB, and we don't have any functionality to add a beer yet, so let's make sure that we are able to do that. The views are already, there's adding functionality in the views, but we need to support this in the REST controller. So let's do this. We are going to create a method, let's see, add beer, and just for fun, let's try to use the put mapping here. Add beer, and the beer will come in the form of the request body. So we use the request body annotation. And the only thing we need to do, well, actually we need to do two things, because when we're adding a beer, we need to set an ID, which can be a random UUID, for example, because we're using MongoDB. There we go. And we need to save this. Beer repository.save beer. There we go. So we can add a beer right now. I guess this should be enough to see something in our application. So let's give it a try. And if not, we also need to add edit functionality and delete functionality. So that's no problem. Add some beer. This is not a very sophisticated user interface that I've spent hours to design. So I hope you guys like it. What's the best beer in Spain? Options? I have no knowledge on this subject, so please help me out here. No good beer in Spain? We can try Dutch beer if there's no problem. Do you want me to try Dutch beer? Yeah? Yeah? Oh, that's great. Well, I like a lot of beers. That's very hard. That's a very hard one. I can't translate this, but I like the ongelovige Thomas, which is Thomas is a character from the Bible. Do you know him? It's one of the disciples of Jesus, the one who didn't believe that he was risen from the dead, right? That's a whole another subject. But actually, this is the name of a great beer from Netherlands, which is in a Belgian quadruple style, which is ironically from another country, but you know. I guess it's around 11% or 12%. It's quite a heavy one. You should just have one in one evening, you know, not more of the. Yeah. So let's send it to our REST interface, and what do you know? We got a beer in our database. That's just great. If you guys don't believe me that this was sent to our application, let's do it again. Let's open up the network tab, because this could also be a client-only demo, right? But I wouldn't do that to you guys. So let's add another one. This is a great Belgian beer, also quadruple actually. Are you starting to see a pattern here, right? Yeah. This one is very hard to get, by the way. If you want to get it, come talk to me after the talk, and we will set things up. You know, yeah. Well, here it goes. There was a beer request to our application, and this is the response. So it gets us the beer entity with a generated ID. I'm sorry, this is very small. I don't think I can make it bigger, but you have to believe me that this is the list of beers that we have right now, and here is a generated ID, also one for the Westvleteren, which is here. So we actually did a response to our Spring Boot application, and we've got a list of our beers right here. That's great. I'm not sure why this says weight in grams. This should say, you know, something like alcohol percentage or something. This is the problem when you're offering this many versions of your presentation, you know. So let's fix that. And this is the beer style. So the only thing that we need to implement right now, and we've got 10 minutes to do that, is edit functionality and delete functionality. Luckily, it's not very hard, because it all relies on extending this beer controller. So in order to be able to delete a beer, we need not the domain events, we need delete mapping. Delete beer, which just needs a beer ID. So let's use the request param annotation string beer ID. And funny thing is, the only thing I need to do is just call a delete with the beer ID, and I guess we're done. Also, we are going to make some edit functionality, so let's use post for that. Update beer. This time we need every data that we can get about the beer, so let's put it in the request body again. And we just need to perform a save to the beer repository. Again, I'm innocent. I'm not sure what this is about, but beer repository save, and then, yeah, I guess it should work, so let's try it out. Oh. Build it again, do some hot deploy. Yeah, this is a pity. It's an in-memory database, so everything is gone now. So we need to enter some more beer information. That's great. So let's do a bit more of our favorites. I really like this one. I don't know if you have had this one. Yeah, it's great. I guess it's a triple. Belgian, which is around 8.5%. Yeah, that's great. Let's add another one, and then we can have enough beers to delete, you know? Yeah. This is a Belgian one that I also like a lot. It's called Barbar. It's honey beer. It's sweetened with honey. It's great. It's around 9, quite high. Not sure. This is like this is a blonde, I guess. Okay, and let's edit one of these. So, for instance, what if I want to drink not a La Chouffe, but a La Chouffe Soleil, which is a summer version of this one? Well, I can just edit it, send it again. And what do you know? We have edited our beer name. That's quite great. That's quite great. There's also a box version of Barbar, which is just about, well, it's a blonde beer, but then in the autumn or the spring. So let's edit that one, and that's no problem. What if I have made a mistake in the alcohol percentage? Oh, it's 8.5 after all. Well, no problem. I can just edit it. It seems we have built a Spring Boot application in just under 40 minutes. So thank you guys for your help. Yeah? Small applause, yeah? I'm always very happy when we arrive at this point. Yeah, because you never know if it's going to succeed in the 40 minutes. Nevertheless, I think I have shown you that it is possible to do it in 40 minutes, and that it doesn't really matter. Well, let's phrase it another way. The requirements don't have to be set in stone, you know? It could be all kinds of things. Especially the things that are supported by the starter dependencies work really well, because you just need to change just one line of code in your build script, and you can just use it. So let's wrap this talk up, and then I guess it's some time for some questions. So Spring Boot gets you up and running quite quickly, because we had a running web server well after I fixed the request mapping, and I got some help from a very kind person in the room. But it gets you up and running fairly quickly if you make sure that you do your mapping URLs. Okay. And it enables you to do rapid development, because it assumes standard configuration that can be the same for everyone. And this is especially beneficial when you're starting a new project and you just use all Spring Boot defaults. And there's a wide range of frameworks that play nice with Spring Boot, as you have seen in the presentation. And if you are interested in the capabilities or how you can adjust this for your own project, you should check out the Spring Starter webpage in the full mode, because it lists all the frameworks that are supported, and there are quite a few, so check it out. I have seen that it is up to the task no matter what choices you make. Fun example, I'm working on a Spring project in my spare time with some friends, and the product owner of the team said, okay, we are storing all the entities right now in a relational database, but I want to be able to do full text search on all the columns. And I said, wow, that's going to be a challenge with relational. And I said, we're going to need a document database, MongoDB, Couchbase. And he said, well, implement it. And I was very lucky that I chose Spring Boot for this project, because I just edited out the relational part, added MongoDB, and I needed to I needed to do some editing on a few repositories, but after that, everything worked again. And well, I'm not sure how this would have gone with another framework, but I was very happy that Spring Boot was so flexible. So I have seen that it can be up to the task no matter what choices you make. So about the other half of the Java community, because not everyone likes Spring, do they? What do you do if you use Java EE, or if you're stuck using Java EE? Well, of course you can't use everything that Spring Boot has to offer. There needs to be a project in the Java EE side of things that implements everything. But you can achieve some level of Spring Bootness because you can use embedded servers if you want. If you like that type of thing, just a jar, fat jar with everything in it. You can use Tommy embedded or Wildfly Swarm. They both support it. So that's one aspect that you can use. And there are some other attempts of using starter dependencies, but it's not quite finished yet because I read a blog on lordofthejars.com about JBoss shrink wrap, which does quick assembly. It's a nice read. You could check it out if you are interested in doing these kind of things with Java EE. It's like a starting point because there's not really an official release of JBoss shrink wrap that does Spring Boot things, but it's a start. There's a code example with about 70 lines of code that does the same as the single line that Spring Boot did. So if you're into that stuff, you can check it out. So there's still hope for you guys if you're using Java EE. I guess it's okay that we can learn from both worlds, right? And that they can steal the features from one another and back and forth, you know. I think both worlds can flourish doing that. Kind of like with the browser wars, you know. Every browser is better right now because Firefox and Chrome and, well, they coexisted, so. I guess there are a few minutes left for a few questions. So are there any questions? There's a microphone here, so you can be heard for everyone. If you ask a question, you get a free stroopwafel. You'll be the first to pick one out, yeah? If there are no questions, I would like to thank you for your time and thank you for being here.